This is the Sabha Niwas of Jaipur. And if you were to visit the palace chronologically, this would be the first place to come to. It's also, in terms of the sequence of public areas to private areas, the first place that a visitor would see. The more important you were, the further in you could go. But for many people, this was the only thing that they would have seen. And even then, it wasn't necessarily all and sundry who were here all the time. The Sabha Niwas is a grand ceremonial public hall, and it would have been used for important state ceremonies when important people visited, ambassadors, and so on and so forth, or important rituals or festivals for the court, which would have originated here, things like the Raj Tilak or the crowning of a Maharaja when he succeeds his predecessor. So today it's set up as both a museum gallery and a Sabha Niwas. The narrative, the story within the gallery tells you precisely these things that I've just mentioned about how it was used in court ceremony and functions and so on. Some of the objects here, though, are superb and haven't been seen in nearly a generation. So it's well worth visiting just for that, but also because the Sabha Niwas has been put back to as close to its original form as it was built. It was originally open on three sides, so you would have had the wonderful impact of these stairs going in, and it was open on three sides, and so it would have been a bit breezier, a bit more comfortable. We've tried to make it that way for our visitors, even though we have to be mindful of the objects that we've now put on display. But this is perhaps the last great audience hall built in this style in North India at the time. Again, Jaipur was founded in 1727. The whole city, and certainly the palace complex, were built in a really rapid building campaign of about 7 years. So when I say the city, I mean primarily the city walls, the major buildings. Some of the private dwellings, of course, took their own time. But the palace complex was certainly built in that major building campaign of about 7 years. So the Sabha Niwas also tells that story. The Rath Khana behind me was one of the second major interventions that the trust made. So the first renovation was the painting and photography gallery. This was the second. And as it says on the tin, it's where we display transports, carriages, palkis, howdahs, things like this. But we didn't want to take the approach that most institutions, most museums take with it. Essentially, what you see is a parking lot or a garage where transports are displayed in sequence. We've tried instead to tell a story that draws on Jaipur's own landscape and its own cultural traditions. So one of the things that people always note, or which is a very striking image, if you see photographs of festivals that take place in Jaipur, especially most of which involve processions, you will see that people not only throng the streets, but also watch the proceedings from these terraces that line all of the major roads of the city. And so we drew on that to create a processional circuit for our visitors. So normally it's the transports which would be in procession, but here we as visitors can process around the gallery and look at these objects, which are also organized so that they tell a story of the different ways in which transports were used. What looking at an object, what looking at a transport can tell us, for instance, about the people who use them. So how it reflects on society, how it reflects on local cultural traditions, and also international connections, because you'll also see, for example, carriages there, one of which is believed to have been a gift from Queen Victoria to Savai Ram Singh II. So it's not just a parking garage. It tells a much wider story. It has a much larger canvas, and we'd love for you to come and take a look. One of the highlights in that gallery is the suit of elephant armor that was specially conserved and has custom mounts that we made to display it, because it's very unusual to find a complete suit of elephant armor. And apart from one or two, one in India that's perhaps in the National Museum and another in the Wallace collection, there are very few complete suits of elephant armor known in the world. And Jaipur was particularly known for being the place where, if you wanted to acquire a suit of armor to, say, gift to a visiting dignitary, this is where you would have it made. We have historical evidence of, if I remember correctly, it was Lord Curzon who might have placed an order for just such a thing to gift to a foreign senior foreign diplomat. And this particular suit was not something that would have been used in warfare or in battle. It's meant for ceremonies and processions. So in that sense, it's decorative, it's lighter, but that doesn't make it any less unique. I'm standing in Riddhi Siddhi Pol. This is the entrance to the private areas of the palace. And one of the ways in which you can tell that a gateway is important and perhaps leading to somewhere important is by looking at the material with which it's made. So this is completely made of marble. And if you look around you at the palace and at the city of Jaipur, you'll see that it's mostly made of rubble and pink wash. So whenever you see a marble gateway in the palace, you know it's going somewhere important. This leads into Pritam Niwas Chowk, which many of our visitors love coming to because it has the four beautifully painted gateways within that space. It's a wonderful photo op for many of our visitors. One side of it, to my left, is completely private. That continues to be, and the whole area of the complex beyond that continues to be the residence of the royal family of Jaipur. And on my right, Anand Mandir, which we saw previously was as the Silakhana, that's on my right. I mean, the ground floor are still private offices, but the upper floor of it is accessible to our visitors. Space behind me is the painting and photography gallery. It's about 10 years old now, and it represents the first major intervention that the trust made in terms of redisplaying the collections and renovating galleries. And the story that it tells is of the interaction between painting and photography at Jaipur. So Jaipur, of course, was founded in 1727. And so the works that you see there date roughly from this period. We have one or two older works just to connect it to, the parent palace, if you will, or parent capital of Amer. But it tells the interaction between painting and photography as visual art forms at the Jaipur court. And it also considers the interaction that Jaipur's court artists had with the wider world. So not just with, photography, which is a new technology which is introduced from outside of India, but also with other artistic traditions in other courts. So a lot of works would have been collected by rulers, or they would have made their way into the atelier through marriage, for instance. Queens were also patrons of art. They would have brought paintings, for instance, of their fathers or their brothers from their home courts. And so these examples of different styles of artistic production were available to Jaipur's artists to refer to riff on, and to create something totally new. And the same thing happens when photography is invented. It's adapted and adopted very quickly in India in general, but certainly at Jaipur. One of the unique aspects of the collection here is that one of the Maharajas of Jaipur, Savai Ram Singh II, was a very good amateur photographer. And not just that he directed people to take images for him or make images for him as part of his studio, but he himself got his hands dirty. So we've got his diary on display. Unfortunately, it's only for 8 months, but it tells us that he himself mixed chemicals and he himself composed the images. He did his own printing. He was interested in equipment. He's also known as the engineer prince, for example. He is one of the people who was responsible for gas lighting in the streets of Jaipur. That was something that he championed. So there are lots of ways in which he was clearly interested in technology, photography being one of them, but he was also a wonderful artist, a photographic artist. And so you see his works on display here. And you also see this kind of literal interaction between painting and photography, because there are these wonderful painted photographs. So artists used photographs and photography not just to help them compose, for example, but to create a completely new work of art that melded these two visual traditions. This is not unique to Jaipur, but of course, the examples that you see are, because they have been produced by artists who have been associated with this court for generations. The building behind me is popularly known as the Silakhana. If you're a resident of Jaipur, you will have memories of it indeed set up as an armory. And it's currently closed for renovation. It's going to be reopened, yes, as a Silakhana, but we're also putting in a new exhibition called Power and Diplomacy at the Jaipur Court. But the building itself is not a silicana. It's called Anand Mandir, and it means abode of pleasure. And if you look up at the ceilings, for example, you will see wonderful painted ceilings showing you musical modes or the ragamala. So that gives us some indication as to how the space might have been used. And so that's what we're drawing on to construct a story, to come up with the narrative that we would like to share with our visitors. So welcome to the courtyard of the Mubarak Mahal. This is the last major building campaign that takes place in Jaipur. So the building behind me, which is called the Mubarak Mahal, is one of the last great architectural productions of the Jaipur court. And this courtyard around it was built sort of around the same time. It's dated to about 1900. And it's wonderful because it pulls together architectural and decorative motifs from lots of different kinds of styles, but all rooted in this region. Today, it houses the textile gallery, which we are about to close, though. It's your last chance to come and see it because it's about to be renovated into a completely new gallery called Jaipur and the World, which is actually very much in keeping with the history of this building, because this was built as a sort of guest house, a sort of visitor reception center, if you will. This is the last and most sort of external courtyard of the palace complex. So this is where foreign visitors in particular were welcomed. And this was constructed so as to provide a space for meeting, for entertaining. As part of the history of this building, it was also used as the Mehkama Khas, or the Council of Jaipur State. This would have been in the earlier part of the 20th century, when Savai Man Singh II was a minor, and the primary affairs of state were run by his council.